Brother Jocelyn's mouth felt dry, his palms were sweaty, his forehead throbbed, his ears hummed. He brought along a book called The New Science, in hope that it would be very boring and it would numb his mind to the closeness of Annie. But the words just blurred on the page. He looked out of the Boeing 707 window and envied the clouds. If only he was out there in a cool rush of air and not sitting next to Sister Annie. There were moments when their garments actually touched, and he thought he might pass out. One of the great blessings of entering Rockhold was the absence of women. At the age of 13, he found the onslaught of adolescence a terrifying experience. Waking up one night with a thundering erection, they even left a permanent kink in his Spider-Man pyjamas. It was bad enough. But going into his parents' bedroom to show them this aberration had proved a mistake. They were in the middle of a complicated sexual manoeuvre involving the use of 7 pillows, a vibrating purple loofah and a great deal of body lotion, and huffing and puffing. Thereafter, the world seemed a sexual minefield. Anything erect made him think of the death of his superhero and his own lost childhood. Anything soft and yielding, from fish pie to wet cement to rice pudding, sent his pulses racing and his thoughts into turmoil of naked, writhing women. Even the moon looked like a giant breast, lamenting the loss of a nipple. He dreaded the sight of raw meat and figs. He prayed this terrible affliction might be taken from him and promised in return a life of abstemious devotion, and, in his infinite wisdom, God granted his wish. The next morning everything had returned to normal. The world was full of soft and hard services, but that's all they were, and contained no sinister associations. He joined the church choir, sang his voice-cracking praises to the everlasting, and gave himself up entirely to God. He endured the misery of school, then went to Rockhold, where God held him safe from all that scattered his brain, and where girls were shadows on the trees, but always at a distance. It was sublime. He was happy. Something in him had disappeared, and he was glad. After all, wasn't that central to faith? That you subliminated to the flesh, to things of the spirit? That you let God eclipse your own carnality and cleanse your mind of filthy thoughts? The desires of the flesh are against the spirit, and the desires of the spirit are against the flesh, St. Paul said. It was a simple choice, and Jocelyn had made his. The more he prayed and meditated, the more he realized Paul included just about everything as a carnal sin. Fornication, impurity, licentiousness, drunkenness, carousing, idolatry, sorcery, enmity, strife, jealousy, anger, selfishness, dissension, party spirit, envy, the lust of the eyes, pride of the flesh. In fact, he went further. If by the Spirit you put to death the deeds of the body, you will live. So in fact, anything physical, eating, looking, hearing, brushing your teeth, walking, sleeping, even things like listening to music or reading, because you used your eyes, had the stink of sin on it. According to this way of understanding life, everything takes on the character of carnal sins and the sensual enjoyment connected with the flesh. Jocelyn took up his crusade against the physical universe with utter dedication. He sought nothing less than the annihilation of the physical. Arguably, this meant the best he could do, the only logical thing he could do, would be to kill himself. But that in itself was a physical act, and therefore a sin. So he kept it all at a distance and determined to live in a spiritual bubble where something like peace resided. Now he was seated next to a woman, a nun, but underneath her habit, a woman. Worse, he needed to go to the toilet, itself probably a carnal sin, and to do so he'd have to get past Sister Annie, which meant a universe of intimacy that would set him back years. Spider-Man would do it by walking across the ceiling, but Spider-Man was dead. He squirmed miserably and reminded himself that the Archbishop himself had chosen him for this fact-finding mission in the service of the Church. God's own emissary on earth had singled him, little Jocelyn, out, and perhaps all this physical torment was a necessary part of it, a trial of the flesh. He thought that if he meditated on the cross, he might endure the flight. Perhaps the need to go to the toilet might even vanish. He closed his eyes and imagined the cross bathed in blood-red light. The laughter of the centurions, the weeping of the Holy Mother, the agonies of the Lord and the thieves, the gash in the side, the sponge, the vinegar, the figure standing beside Mary, looking up at his agony. Despite the distance, he could feel her warmth, her sweet breath. His misty eyes cleared, and he saw it was her, Annie, Sister Annie, there at the final hour. "If you want to go to the bathroom, brother, why don't you? I'm not so fat as you can't slip by." She was so close, her eyes like Bourneville chocolate, in great confusion and no little physical distress. He edged past her, and the rustle of cloth, the flesh beneath, everything unravelling. The engaged sign lit at the toilet. He waited outside miserably, feeling the eyes of everyone on him. Brother Jocelyn, desperate to pee. The air hostess noticed his discomfort and smiled. Jocelyn blushed plum purple. He leaned his face against the door and hoped the plane would crash, then uttered a quick prayer, asking to be forgiven for such a thought. He could hear someone inside. What on earth were they doing? He listened closely. It was a constant babble from someone who was clearly in some sort of distress. He turned to the hostess. "Excuse me, I think there may be some sort of problem in there," he said. The young woman, standing dangerously close to him, listened at the door. "Someone's talking very quickly. There must be more than one in there, unless they're using the phone illegally," she said. She knocked on the door. The voice stopped. "Hello? Is everything all right in there?" she asked. A pause. She rapped on the door. "Hello? Could you open this door, please?" The babbling started again, only louder and more furiously. The hostess used the intercom to summon a male colleague. He rapped on the door, but the babbling therein continued. He went into the pilot's cockpit, and Jocelyn heard them talking. His need to pee was becoming desperate. The young man returned and knocked on the door again. No response. "Stand back, please," he said to Jocelyn. He barged the door, which bowed but held. A few passengers looked up, alarmed. A smell of danger leaked down the gangway. The hostess tried to block what was happening and reassure those passengers nearest that everything was okay. The young man took a run at the door and flung his weight at it. The door fell in. Jocelyn got a glimpse of a young man kneeling with his head down a toilet bowl. The door crashed on his back, with the steward on top of it. Jocelyn stood watching, horrified. The steward scrambled up and dragged the door from the prostrate, struggling Dijwal. He had been kneeling before the toilet bowl, praying fervently that God would not allow the plane to crash. When the combined weight of the door and the steward lurched him forward and rammed his head down the toilet bowl, where it was now stuck fast, his skinny legs thrashing out behind him, his arms embraced the toilet bowl as if he was being devoured head first by a metal-mouthed monster. Every time he tried to breathe, he got a nose and a mouthful of acrid water. He was drowning. It took a moment for the steward to take in what had happened. Then he grabbed the Dijwal's legs and tried to pull him out, but his head was jammed down to the gills. There was a great deal of spluttering and gurgling and kicking. Dijwal was becoming frantic. The steward turned to Jocelyn. "Grab a leg. Help me yank him out." Jocelyn grabbed the leg, which promptly kicked him in the balls. His desire to pee doubled, and the pain seared up his spine. The steward grabbed the other leg, while the stewardess got a bar of soap and rubbed it around the toilet bowl where Dijwal's head was stuck fast. Hopefully this would create added slippage. "Okay, we're going to count to 3 and then pull," shouted the steward to Dijwal. Replied the young man. "Is that Arabic or something?" asked the steward. "I think it's a noise someone makes when they're nearly dead," said Jocelyn. The steward counted 1, 2, 3, then they both yanked and heaved. Dijwal would not budge, and his arms started flaying wildly. He accidentally pressed the flush button, and the toilet flushed over his head. The gurglings and the splutterings became more panicky. A large, florid-faced man appeared, eating a chicken and a bacon sandwich. "Ron, I'm a plumber," he said. "We've got an emergency here, Ron. What do you suggest?" Ignoring Dijwal's gargling and bubbling. He leaned down and looked to the toilets. He shook his head sadly. I don't know what muppet decided to install these, but they're a bugger to shift. See, if you'd used a traditional porcelain vitreous china, say American Standard 3708.216.020 H2O option, a siphonic dual flush round font, or the pricier, but in my view, ultimately more durable, elongated Toto 12-inch rough-in, elegant low-profile design, power gravity system, large water surface and 1.6 GPF, then we'd be laughing. Why? Asked the stewardess. Because we could take a monkey wrench to the fucker and smash it in. But what you got here in these chrome-plated... Look, see this? What you got here is a chrome hexagon half-inch nipple which some comedian, don't ask me why, has attached to an isolator valve. And what does that mean? She asked. If I tell you I once did a woman in Tunbridge Wells... Tell a lie. Canterbury East. Nice woman. Her poodle got his arse rammed down a chrome-plated... Don't ask me why. How's not to reason? Though I surmised it must be trying to emulate its mistress, as it were. Nervy breed, poodles. It's a French in them, see? Very volatile. Anyway, long story short, she had an hexagon half-inch nipple too, and it took me all morning armed to the teeth with a set of open-ended ratchet rings to ease off the double-webbed flange and pull the bastard off. Was the poodle okay? Asked the steward. Traumatised rectum. Permanent kink in its short and curly, but it could have been worse. Jocelyn saw with horror that the legs had stopped kicking and had progressed to involuntary twitching. I think we ought to do something, he said. Interesting fact about your porcelain bowls, though. They're prone to heavy sweating, said Ron. Toilet bowls don't sweat, said the steward. Ron smiled knowingly. You're not the first to question it. See, toilet bowls sweat due to the fact that the air around the toilet is considerably warmer than the temperature of the toilet water. This creates condensation and causes the toilet to sweat. And you know what that can lead to, don't you? What? Asked the stewardess. Mould and mildew. I'll tell you some stories that I've seen growing in some toilet bowls. Make your hair curl. Had a woman out Epping Way once. Tell a lie, Walthamstow it was. What I found when I got my rubbers down her bowl and around her U-bend make a camel puke. I don't want to hear this, said the stewardess. Ron chuckled. It's all right. Long story short, I had the solution in my lunch bucket. They all looked at him. Coca-Cola, see? The old citric acid is deaf to organic stains on the vitreous china. Tricks of the trade. Dishwa's legs were now limp. I think he might be dead, said Jocelyn. Ron tapped the chrome toilet bowl knowingly. See, if you had a back flush installed, it would torpedo his head from down under, as it were. But, as it is... What? Asked the steward. You're basically buggered, said Ron, taking a bite of his sandwich and giving a last professional shake of his head at the inept plumbing arrangements. He looked at the stewardess. When you got a minute, love, a lager for me and a white wine for the wife. J56 and 57, on the right there. He sauntered off back to his seat. The three of them looked at Dijwar's legs. The steward could see his pay rise going the same way as Dijwar. The stewardess looked at Jocelyn's brown habit. Can't you pray or something? She asked. Jocelyn closed his eyes. Dear Lord, have mercy on us sinners and help us free this poor soul from his predicament. He opened his eyes. He and the steward each grabbed a leg, while the stewardess straggled Dijwar and held his shoulders. 1, 2, 3, then they all gave a last mighty heave. Muscles haunched and stretched, a collective groan. A breaking point loomed. The miracle of miracles as Dijwar's head came free with a flatulent plop, so loud people jumped from their seats at the back of the plane. Jocelyn careered back into the drinks trolley, the steward on top of him, and on top of them the stewardess, still riding Dijwar's back like a raunchy cowgirl on a truculent stallion. This tangle slowly unravelled, and they stood looking at Dijwar on the floor, wet, in shock, and hyperventilating. Acting on instinct rather than medical knowledge, the stewardess slapped him around the face, and the steward threw a cup of water over his face. His startled eyes opened, now bloodshot and swollen. He was back, almost. Jocelyn raced to the toilet and achieved a personal first, a public pee. Half an hour later, Dijois was festooned between Annie and Jocelyn. He had barely spoken, except to refuse a brandy. Something had altered in his frontal lobes. Whenever he closed his eyes, he was back there, trapped, unable to breathe, his eyes full of watery blackness, the world a far-away tiny echo of voices and the amplified roar of engines. This was hell. He had looked into it, and he knew. He must never sleep again, or it would claim him for good. God had shown him this, and he must obey.